Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Destabilizing Disability. As you can see, today's a little different. It's just me. Are you surprised? I sure am. Yeah, I hope that's okay with everyone, but if not, I'm sorry. Anyways, today we're also going to be talking about another perspective from some similar topics we've discussed in the past already, and that's for the caregiver specifically when you have a spouse that does have a chronic illness. We're going to be talking about ways that you can kind of cope with what's going on, because when you have these things happen, it's hard for both parties. It really is. Both are struggling through the same process. The one person has the actual illnesses that they deal with, but then the spouse has to kind of live that life along with them and the limitations that it entails. But on top of that, they have to see their mate struggling through these things, and it's horrible. It's horrible to have to live through. So even though the spouse may not be the one that has the illnesses, they can still have a hard life to deal with. Maybe, and you can't weigh one or the other because you're both going through it together. We're going to talk about things that I kind of do to help feed my soul. And not just that, but even trying to balance these things out, because you can go one way or the other too much. One of the struggles that I've noticed that we kind of deal with is, in one of the videos we just put out, is being homebound. That can be a pretty big one because you can get a little stir crazy. You can kind of just, you know, and even though you're both trying to work together, rely on one another, it can be a struggle to have to just be shut in. You know, obviously we all went through that during the pandemic, but now factor that into this could be literally for the foreseeable future, because obviously the pandemic is kind of like wrapping up. You know, it is wrapped up, but when you have a chronic illness, those things don't necessarily go away. They're almost guaranteed to stay with you for life. And so either things will be relatively the same unless you can set up, you know, some things to help, or they may even get worse as time goes on. Now, with Tara, it's a little easier because she can be pretty much a homebody. Like, she's, for the most part, content with being at home anyways. So it doesn't bother her as much. I won't say it doesn't bother her at all. Like, she does want to hang out with friends. She does probably want to go and do things and whatnot. However, I would say my tolerance level is a lot lower in that regard than hers. Like, I can be a homebody, but not as much as her. And so sometimes I get a little like, okay, I need to go out. I want to go do something. I want to see a friend. You know, in particular, I would obviously rather do those things with Tara. I'd rather go out together and do those things. But that's not necessarily a thing at this time. We're working towards it, but at this moment, it's not a thing. It's not always the funnest thing, because sometimes it does kind of feel like you're having to compromise a lot, and you're not technically getting what you were maybe wanting or looking for. But it can all be about shifting your perspective and remembering why you're doing this. You know, you're doing this because you love your spouse and you want to be able to support them in their time of need. Something that I've had to learn to do is, because sometimes I get a little frustrated because some of the things I do want to do are a little hard for us in particular right now. I want to be able to get together with friends but like go meet them. I love going to the movies, especially if they have, this is kind of stupid. I know, it's stupid. Don't worry about it. You can comment if you must, but it is stupid. And I know that, and I don't care. But sometimes the popcorn factors it in for me. The popcorn makes it, because something about it is just, movie theater popcorn still gets it for me sometimes. Yes, it's bad for you. I am not promoting it by any means, but I like it. So, occasional. That's the key. Probably not at all, but you know, anyways. I wouldn't mind going to see a movie if the opportunity was there. I mean, granted, right now, just where Tara is with her problems that she's facing right now, we're not the most comfortable leaving her in the hands of people, other people rather, that, you know, we're not absolutely sure could deal with those things, because she has some really hard times, unfortunately. And that requires both a physical and mental and maybe even emotional bearing that some people we know probably just aren't ready for. And because we're not living in our own house, it's not fair to our parent that we live with to bring a stranger into the home, nor would we even feel comfortable with that unless it was literally absolutely necessary. And technically it's not right now. Another factor is financially, also discussed in one of our videos. We're kind of not in that place where I could just go do that, you know, or even grab a bite to eat somewhere. So that kind of limits us right there. And then our car situation on top of that, like there's a bunch of things kind of affecting us in particular right now that kind of makes it so it's like probably going out right now is not a thing. So that being said, it does kind of mean that I have to be here more. So that means I have to find ways to still feed myself too, so I'm still able to fulfill my role as both spouse and caregiver. Because otherwise, we're both just going to be down all the time. Whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, we're going to both just be exhausted. And so that might mean that I kind of have to rely on some of my support systems, my friends that are willing to come see me and come hang out, you know, on obviously on days that are okay to do that. We of course would set that up ahead of time and make sure that that's okay. But yeah, so those are things that I like to do, you know, and I like to play video games, as we also discussed in the other video. I like to play board games. I like to play card games. One of my friends that I have over, we usually tend to play the same game, honestly. We'll play the board game too. We'll play Catan. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so that's something we do. And we'll grill out, or we make some good food. I have to be careful. See, that's one of the issues that I've come into actually personally is I have a little bit of, it's not a big deal, but I have a health issue that I have to deal with now as well. If I'm correct, I have psoriasis. And so unfortunately that kind of limits me in my diet, because it can, sometimes what I eat can flare up my symptoms, at least that's what it seems to be as of late. So I have to be careful with certain foods. But every now and then I do kind of do a little cheat just to kind of see where I'm at. Because in theory, the psoriasis can go into remission and you can eat relatively normal. Like I would, you know, they say to obviously like be careful when you're reincorporating those things in, because they still can, you know, basically re-flare it up. But anyways, that aside. The point is that doing stuff like that are enjoyable and take you away from the moment that you're living in, because sometimes you can get wrapped up in all the negative of your situation that you forget that there are positives and that there are things that are enjoyable still, both as a couple, separately, all the above. It's not always easy. It's not always easy for me, because sometimes I do feel very much like a burden, an extra burden on my spouse when I talk about my problems that seem so small compared to what she's going through. Because they really do feel so much smaller to me than what is presently going on with her and even our situation. But the thing is that if you don't handle those things, it can become a worse situation, because then you can become resentful. And that's not okay, because they don't deserve that. It's not their fault. It's not your spouse's fault that they are dealing with what they are. That is how they were, you know, their genetics, how they were born. And that's sometimes just life right now. It's not fun. It's not easy. It's not fair. But remember that you're in it together. I feel embarrassed sometimes talking about things, because I do. Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't feel that way, because I either feel selfish or I feel like I don't know, like it's stupid, but it's not. Feelings are valid. Now, what can you do about those feelings? That's the question. There are plenty of things that you can do. Maybe something that, you're asking or looking for might be a little out of reach at that moment. Like how I was just talking about, some things for me might be a little bit out of reach at the moment. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that it's not something that you can't work towards. And then just for the moment, build up a little bit of endurance and work with your circumstances as they presently are. On the flip side of that, one of the struggles that I've had is sometimes I get so overwhelmed that I do get wrapped up in I have some mobile games that I play sometimes to just kind of like distract myself and unwind. And that's okay to do, in spare moments. Prioritize. In our particular situation, there's quite a few things happening that are pretty big stuff, pretty heavy stuff. A lot of issues financially, a lot of issues with transportation, all these things. I will say this is like, sometimes when you do get a taste of those things again, especially if it's been a while, and then you kind of get reintroduced to those things, it's like, oh my goodness, life doesn't have to be like this. I can go and enjoy myself and have friends and da-da-da. And it can almost be, I don't want to say intoxicating, but like it can almost be like, whoa, I remember now. But it can be a problem because you might get a little too unbalanced. I would say being a caregiver for your spouse requires a lot more responsibility than if you were to live without those conditions. It does require a lot more responsibility, and it does require a lot more initiative and prioritizing, thinking ahead. And those are things I do struggle with. And it does make it a challenge for us to cope with some things because of that. I feel awful that she has to put up with me sometimes. But thankfully, she has worked with me on those things, and we're working together. I'm working on those things. Another aspect that I could actually talk about is, depending on where your spouse is with their chronic condition, you might have to help them more in a physical way. I know with Tara, we've had times where she's had a really, really rough time with pain, to the point where I've had to either hold her up, carry her, be able to give her massages for a decent-ish amount of time, which, I'm not used to doing, at least not for that length of time. But anyways, so it requires you to have to kind of do more in all the ways, physically, mentally, emotionally. You have to kind of plan things out, think ahead, etc. Especially if you do go anywhere for like appointments or whatever. Those things can be pretty big. Like you need to be prepared for that. Some spouses may need a wheelchair. They might need help carrying extra bags. You might need a bag to take some bags, like little small bags, makeup bags, etc. You might need to do a lot more than you're used to in that way in order to help your spouse. It can wear you down, either as far as how you feel for them having to go through those things, or where you guys are at in your life. It can really bring you down, and it can be very depressing. Those things are temporary. For us in particular, if she has a more severe episode, it is not joyous to go through, and it is hard. It is very hard for me because those kinds of things are stressful for me anyways. Being in hospitals, seeing people in pain, hurt, etc. It's hard for me, and I get sucked into my own world of trying to remove myself from the situation, which is bad for her. It's, and I need to be more present so that I can help her, because otherwise, even just my demeanor can make her feel unsafe, unsupported, like I'm not present with her. She feels it. And so that might happen with you guys too. If that happens with you, by all means, leave a comment down below. But they're relying on you. They need you. You might need to step up and say something comforting, whatever that might look like for your spouse. So that takes a lot of thought and preparation ahead of time. You know, when an episode happens, what am I going to say? How can I be supportive? It's hard to ask those things when it's happening. Like, what can I do to help you? It puts a lot more work on the other person when they're already undergoing a severe situation. It's not always easy because you can't always account for everything in every situation. But at least if there are things that kind of seem to happen over and over again in that way, like they, for the most part, tend to go about the same way. Like with Tara, if she has a severe episode, we already know that she needs an ice pack usually, maybe a pillow, some towels, etc. You know, those are some things that you can already have ready to go, for example. That way it's already done, and now it's literally only specifics that might be specific to that situation that need to be worried about. That's been my struggle too. Sometimes I do tend to kind of just, you know, what can I do? What will help you? But even that can be more mental load on them, which affects all the other loads, obviously. If you're struggling up here, then you're going to struggle everywhere else too. You might need to take the lead more in making decisions than maybe you're used to, or whatever the case is, and carrying more of the load, so to speak, as well. You know, with me, some of the things that I've had to take on are more housework, for example. Being a caregiver, obviously, that means I'm home all the time. So that means I took over doing the laundry, the cooking, cleaning, and kind of like, you know, tidying up from day to day too. And then even our groceries, things, all those things, I've had to take even more of a role on in doing all that. And then on top of that, even when it comes to making some decisions, that it's not necessarily that it would be a decision that she would make, but maybe it would be more shared versus, you know, it's just kind of like, okay, I need to be the one to decide. So that can be a little daunting sometimes, especially when, for me, I struggle with that because I want to make the right decision. And sometimes you just won't know what that looks like. And sometimes there is no right decision. Sometimes it's that you have to pick the lesser of the poisons, and then just you deal with it, you know? But you can at least put more thought into the decisions instead of just making whatever decision you think fits the situation willy-nilly, off the cuff, or whatever the saying is. Off the cuff. Be flexible is one of my other big things. You have to kind of go with the flow on some things. Some things you need to be proactive for. Some things you do need to kind of go with the flow. Something else to kind of cope with these things is, as we talked about in one of our videos, we bond over TV shows, video games, board games, you know, our walks. Just because you are also having to live this hard life together doesn't mean that you can't still take time to bond together, because that's what's going to help you endure it, is that bond that you create with each other. Not allowing this other aspect of your life, the negative aspects, to weigh down what positive aspects you can have. They are still there. And one of the other big things too that can make a huge difference is research. I'm horrible at researching. Topics like that are harder for me. Again, hate hospitals, hate seeing people in pain. Anyways, yeah, so research to find out what these chronic conditions mean for your spouse, and in a way, what they'll mean for you. The more you know, the more you'll be able to kind of work with those things and handle those things and support your spouse. What they can cause, maybe ways to cope and ease the discomfort that comes with those things. Those things can go a long way. And then one last thing that I'll go over that has been another big one for me is sometimes your spouse with the chronic condition might need to vent, and that might be a lot. That might be on a regular basis, or it might be every day, it might be once a month, whatever that looks like for you guys. I've struggled with that sometimes because I get so bogged down by what's being said that, and I'm kind of just like, okay, well, how do I fix it? How do I fix it? Sometimes, yes, it is about fixing it, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just about being a listening ear. Sometimes you participate, so to speak, as far as maybe providing solutions. Other times it's more just like if she's like, oh, I can't believe that person, how that doctor treated me. I just, validate. I can't believe it either. That person was horrible. Because sometimes when it's just like, I do this sometimes, I do, and I need to work on that. But sometimes it's just like, yeah, you are responding, you're kind of engaging, but you're not. That being said, yes, sometimes it is a challenge. You might be a little more tired, you might be a little more cranky, you might be a little more depressed yourself. She can tell something's going on with me. And then a lot of times that translates to she thinks she's bothering me or being a burden on me, but that's not how I feel. It's always something else that's on my mind, or that's bothering me, or that I'm tired mentally or physically, emotionally, all of the above, whatever it is. It's usually not anything to do with her specifically, but it makes her feel that way. Just because you know that it's not your spouse, they don't know that. And then it makes them, when they're already feeling down too, it makes them feel even worse because now they feel like they're being a burden. The point is that that's not what you're thinking or feeling, but that's how it can be interpreted if you don't communicate. Those are some of my big things that I have gone through, and I'm sure you guys have gone through a lot of things as well. Leave a comment. Tell us what you've used to cope. What have you done, both as individuals, as a couple, to get through it? What are some strategies that you use? What have you discussed? Whatever. Tell us. We want to know. So we will see you next time, and I'm sure more than likely it'll be together. So catch you guys later.